The message came through every communication channel at once. It was desperate, it was broken, and it was dying. Commander of the Confederation sent the distress call from a burning bridge. Around him, his crew worked frantically at stations that sparked and smoked. The ship shook as another explosion rocked the hull. Outside the windows, space was filled with fire and death. "This is the Confederation to all spacefaring civilizations," said, his four-fingered hands gripping the console. "We are under attack by the swarm. Our worlds are burning. Our people are dying. We need help, please, anyone who can hear this. We are begging for aid." The message traveled across the galaxy at faster-than-light speed. It reached the Empire first. They had ships. They had weapons. They had soldiers who had fought in 100 wars. The Emperor read the message and closed his eyes. Then he gave his answer. "No, that cannot be stopped. We will not send our people to die." The message reached the assembly next. They were scientists and thinkers, beings of pure logic who had mapped half the known universe. They ran calculations and simulations. The results were clear. The probability of success is 0.03%. We cannot justify the loss of life. We will not respond. One by one, every advanced civilization in the galaxy received the call. One by one, they all said no. The swarm had destroyed 17 species in the last century. They were insects the size of dogs, with acid for blood and no mercy in their collective mind. They consumed everything. They left nothing behind. They had always been peaceful. They traded with other species. They shared their technology. They had never built weapons of war because they believed the galaxy had moved past such things. They were wrong. 3 of their 4 were already gone. Prime was the last, and they were coming. Sent the message one final time. He didn't expect an answer. He just wanted someone to know they had existed, that they had tried. Then something unexpected happened. Far across the galaxy, on a blue world called Earth, the message arrived at a military station. A young officer named Corporal Jinho was on duty when the communication came through. He was supposed to forward it to his superiors and move on. Instead, he listened to the whole thing. The commander's voice was filled with fear. Jinho had heard that kind of fear before. It was the sound of someone watching everything they loved burn. He forwarded the message to Captain Min, of the UNSC Righteous Fury. Min was in his quarters when the message arrived. He was a tall man with hard eyes and starting to show in his black hair. He had been a Marine for 20 years. He had seen war up close and personal. When he heard the distress call, he knew what it meant. He called his senior staff immediately. Lieutenant Jin arrived first. She was young for her rank, but she had earned it in the Outer Colony Wars. She stood at attention while Min played the message. Sergeant Haewon came next. She was short but built like a tank. Her arms were covered in scars from close combat. She listened to the message with her jaw clenched. "They are dying," Min said simply. "The swarm is destroying them." "I've read about the," Jin said quietly. "They're bad, really bad. Every species that's encountered them has either run or died." "How many ships do they have left?" Haewon asked. Jinho pulled up the data. According to their last transmission, maybe 50. They started with 300. They have thousands. The room was quiet for a moment. "What did the other species say?" Jin asked, though she already knew the answer. "Every single one said no," Min replied. The collective, all of them, they say it's suicide to help." "It probably is," Haewon said. She wasn't being negative, she was being honest. "We've got 400 Marines on this ship. They have millions, maybe billions. The numbers don't work." Min walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Earth hung in the distance, a beautiful blue marble in the black. Humanity had only been in space for 50 years. They were the new kids in the galaxy. Most alien species barely knew they existed. "Send a request to Earth Command," Min said finally. "Request permission to respond to the distress call." Jin and Haewon exchanged glances. They had both expected this. Min was a Marine to his core. When someone called for help, he answered. "Sir," Jin said carefully, "they sent another message an hour ago. They're telling everyone not to come. They say anyone who tries to help will die with them." "I heard that part," Min said. "And you still want to go?" He turned to face them. His expression was calm. "When I joined the Marines, I took an oath. Protect those who can't protect themselves. They can't protect themselves. So yes, I want to go." The request went up the chain of command. It reached admirals and generals. It reached politicians and counselors. For 6 hours they debated. Some said humanity should stay out of it. There were strangers. They were too dangerous. Why should humans die for aliens they'd never met? Others argued differently. This was humanity's chance to prove themselves to the galaxy, to show they were more than just another species scrambling for resources. In the end, the decision came from someone unexpected. The Secretary General of Earth was an old woman who had lived through 3 wars. She had buried 2 sons and a daughter. She knew what sacrifice meant. Her message was simple: permission granted, show them what humans are made of. Min gathered his Marines in the hangar bay. 400 men and women stood at attention. They were young and old, veterans and rookies. They came from every corner of Earth. "I'm not going to lie to you," Min said, his voice carrying across the bay. "This is bad. They are facing an enemy that has destroyed civilizations. The odds are not in our favor. Command has given us permission to go, but I'm giving each of you a choice. Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so. No judgment, no consequences." He paused and looked across the assembled faces. "Anyone who wants out, step forward now." Nobody moved, not a single Marine. Private Dongwu, barely 20 years old, raised his hand. Min nodded at him. "Sir, with respect, we're Marines. Marines don't leave people behind. If they need help, we're going, all of us." A murmur of agreement went through the ranks. Haewon allowed herself a small smile. Min felt something in his chest tighten. Pride, maybe, or fear for what was coming, probably both. "Then get to your stations," he said. "We jump in 30 minutes." The Righteous Fury's engines roared to life. Jinho sent one final message to them before they entered FTL. "Confederation, this is the UNSC Righteous Fury. We received your distress call. We're coming to help. Hold on." On the bridge of his dying ship read the message 3 times. He couldn't believe it. Someone had answered. These humans, he had barely heard of them. They were so new to space, so small compared to the great civilizations. And they were coming. He sent back a reply immediately. "Human ship, do not come. You don't understand what you're facing. They will kill you all, please. Run while you can." The response from the Righteous Fury came back in seconds. "We're already on our way. See you soon." The human ship disappeared into faster-than-light travel, racing toward that had made the galaxy's greatest powers turn away in fear. Looked at his crew. They looked back at him with hope in their eyes, hope that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't die alone. In the depths of space, the swarm continued its advance. Millions of bodies moved as one, guided by their queen's hunger. They had destroyed so many species before. These humans would be no different. But they had never met humans before. They didn't know that when a human hears someone crying for help, they don't calculate the odds. They don't run simulations. They just come running. The Righteous Fury dropped out of FTL space and into hell. Jinho's sensors lit up like a festival of death. His screens showed red everywhere. His hands moved quickly across the controls, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Captain," he said, his voice tight, "I'm reading 47 destroyed ships in orbit. No, wait, 53. The debris field is massive." Min stood on the bridge, hands behind his back, watching the main screen. Prime hung in space below them. Half the planet was dark. Not the darkness of night, but the darkness of cities that had stopped burning because there was nothing left to burn. "Numbers?" he asked calmly. Jinho swallowed hard. "Sir, I can't get an exact count. There are too many. I'm seeing thousands of landing craft, maybe tens of thousands, and that's just what's heading to the surface. The main swarm fleet is on the far side of the planet." Lieutenant Jin stood at the tactical station. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Commander." "Put it through." The commander's face appeared on the screen. He looked worse than his voice had sounded. One of his eyes was swollen shut. Blood, purple, not red, ran down his face. Behind him, his bridge was barely functional. "Human ship said, you actually came." "We said we would," Min replied simply. "You need to leave, now, while you still can. They are everywhere. We have maybe 6 hours before they take the last city on the planet. After that, we're extinct. Your ship can't change that. Please, don't die with us." Min was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. It was a hard smile, a warrior's smile. "Commander, how many civilians do you have left on the planet?" Looked confused by the question. "Approximately 2 million. They're in the capital city. We've evacuated everyone we could from the other continents, but—" "Then we have work to do," Min interrupted. "Send us the coordinates of the heaviest concentration. We're going in." "You have one ship," almost shouted. "One ship with what? A few hundred soldiers. They have millions. This is madness." "Probably," Min agreed. "But we came here to fight, not to watch. Send those coordinates." Jin was already pulling up the planetary data. "Sir, I've got the location. They are concentrated on the northern continent. They've established what looks like a hive structure outside the capital city. That's where they're launching their attacks from." "That's where we're going," Min said. He pressed the intercom. "All Marines, this is the captain. Battle stations. We drop in 10 minutes. God help us all." In the drop bay, Sergeant Hayone walked among her soldiers. They were checking their weapons and armor. The drop pods stood ready, each one designed to carry 6 Marines through orbital entry and straight into combat. Private Dongwu looked up as Hayone passed. He was young, but his hands were steady as he loaded magazines into his rifle. "Sergeant," he said, "is it true what they're saying, that they eat their victims alive?" Hayone stopped. She looked at the young Marine. She could lie to make him feel better, or she could tell the truth. "Yes," she said simply. "They dissolve you with acid and consume what's left, so don't get caught. Keep your rifle loaded and your head on a swivel. Understand?" Dongwu nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." "Good." She raised her voice so all the Marines could hear. "Listen up. They have never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. That's our advantage. They think in swarms. We think like individuals. They rely on numbers. We rely on tactics. When we hit that ground, I want overwhelming violence. Make every shot count. Make every grenade hurt. And remember, those civilians down there are counting on us. We don't quit. We don't run. We fight until there's nothing left to fight or nothing left of us. Are we clear?" "Yes, Sergeant," the Marines shouted back. The drop pods launched 12 minutes later. Jin led the first wave. Her pod screamed through the atmosphere, the exterior glowing red with heat. Through the small window, she could see 5 other pods falling alongside her. Below, the planet's surface rushed up to meet them. The retro-rockets fired at the last second. The pod hit the ground hard enough to rattle her teeth. The door blew open with explosive charges. Jin came out with her rifle up, scanning for targets. She didn't have to scan long. They were everywhere. They looked like mantises crossed with centipedes, each one as big as a large dog. Their bodies were covered in black chitin that seemed to absorb light. They had too many legs, too many eyes, and mandibles that dripped with acid. They moved fast, faster than anything their size should move. And there were hundreds of them, thousands. "Contact," Jin shouted into her radio. "Contact on all sides." The Marines formed a defensive circle automatically. Their rifles opened up, the sound of gunfire splitting the air. They charged without fear, without hesitation, like a wave of living nightmares. Dongwu fired his rifle in controlled bursts, just like training. His first shots hit in the head. The creature's skull exploded in a spray of yellow-green fluid. It kept coming for 3 more steps before collapsing. "They don't go down easy," he yelled. "Then shoot them more," Haewon's voice came back. She was firing her heavy machine gun in long bursts, mowing down like wheat. "Aim for the head or the thorax. Body shots don't count." The battle became chaos. They threw themselves at the Marines without strategy, without tactics, just pure overwhelming numbers. For every one the Marines killed, 2 more appeared. But the humans held their ground. Private Wu threw a grenade into a cluster of charging. The explosion sent bodies flying. She followed up with rifle fire, picking off the survivors. Corporal Wu, the medic, dragged a wounded Marine behind a piece of cover while firing his pistol one-handed at approaching. "I need cover fire," he shouted. 2 Marines immediately shifted their position to protect him, while he worked on the wounded soldier. This was what they had never seen before. These humans fought like they were connected by invisible strings. When one moved, others adjusted. When one called for help, others responded instantly. They were individuals, but they fought like they shared one mind. From orbit, watched the battle on his sensors. He saw the human drop zone, a tiny circle of blue signals surrounded by a sea of red contacts. "They're going to be overrun," his tactical officer said quietly. Watched the blue signals. They weren't retreating. They were holding. Against impossible odds, they were holding. "Send our remaining fighters," he ordered suddenly. "All of them, support the humans." "Sir, we only have 12 fighters left. If we commit them and they're destroyed, then we die protecting the people who came to save us," snapped. "Send them now." On the ground, Jin heard the roar of aircraft overhead. She looked up to see fighters screaming across the sky, their weapons firing into the swarm. "We've got air support," she called out. "Push forward, establish a perimeter." The Marines advanced. It was slow, bloody work. Every meter cost them, but they moved forward, not back. Haewon found herself face to face with a that had broken through the line. It reared up on its hind legs, mandibles spread wide. She could see the acid dripping from them. She didn't hesitate. She pulled her combat knife and drove it straight through the creature's head. It thrashed and died, nearly taking her arm off with it. "Sergeant's gone melee," Dongwu shouted with something like joy in his voice. "If she can do it, so can we." The Marines' battle cry went up. Not words, just a roar of defiance. They had conquered 17 species. They had faced warriors from a dozen different worlds. But they had never faced anyone quite like humans. These creatures didn't run when the odds were against them. They didn't calculate probability. They just fought harder. 2 hours into the battle, the Marines had established a defensive zone around their landing site. Bodies, both and human, littered the ground. The air smelled like blood and acid and smoke. Men stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury, watching the tactical display. His Marines had taken 23 casualties, 8 dead, 15 wounded, but they had killed thousands of. And they weren't done yet. "Lieutenant Jin," he said into the comm, "what's your status?" Her voice came back, breathing hard. "We're holding, sir, barely, but we're holding." "Good, because in 30 minutes we're sending the second wave. And this time, we're bringing everything we've got." On the command ship, stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans were supposed to be dead by now. They were supposed to be overrun and consumed like everyone else who had faced the. Instead, they were winning. It was impossible, but it was happening. For the first time in weeks, felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The battle lasted 3 days without stopping. 72 hours of constant fighting that turned the streets of Prime's capital into a nightmare landscape of smoke, fire, and death. The Marines didn't sleep. They couldn't afford to. Every time they tried to rest, they came again in waves that seemed endless. Sergeant Sangwoo led the demolition team through the ruined city on the second day. He was a big man with steady hands and a mind that understood explosives better than most people understood language. "This building," he said, pointing to a tall structure that leaned dangerously to one side. "We drop it across this street. They are using this route to flank our position. We collapse the building, we cut off their approach." Private Wu looked at the building nervously. "Sergeant, that thing has to weigh thousands of tons. How much explosive do we need?" Sangwoo smiled. It was a dangerous smile, all of it. They spent 2 hours planting charges while HFY's squad kept them at bay. The sound of gunfire was constant now. Nobody even flinched at it anymore. When the charges were ready, Sangwoo radioed for everyone to pull back. The Marines retreated 2 blocks away. The civilians who had been sheltering nearby were moved to safer positions. "Fire in the hole," Sangwoo called out. He pressed the detonator. The explosion was enormous. The building didn't just collapse, it seemed to fold in on itself before crashing down across the entire street. Dust and debris filled the air like a fog. When it cleared, the street was completely blocked. Thousands of tons of rubble created a wall 50 feet high. From the other side, they could hear the screeching in frustration. "That'll hold them for a while," Sangwoo said with satisfaction. But they were learning. They adapted quickly. When the humans blocked one route, the creatures found another. When the Marines set up kill zones with overlapping fields of fire, they started attacking from underground. Combat engineer Mi Young worked with whatever she could find to keep the Marines alive. She was small and quiet, but her mind worked like a machine. She saw solutions where others saw problems. On the second night, she discovered something interesting in a supply depot. Shield generators, the kind they used to protect their buildings during storms. "These put out a lot of power," she said to Min over the radio. "What if we could make them mobile?" "Can you do that?" the captain asked. Mi Young looked at the generator, then at a damaged human transport vehicle. "Give me 4 hours." She did it in 3. The result was a makeshift armored vehicle with a shield projector mounted on top. It could move forward and create a wall of energy that they couldn't penetrate. Behind it, Marines could advance without being swarmed. "You're a genius," Jin said when she saw it. Mi Young just shrugged. "I'm an engineer, this is what we do." They built 5 more that night. But the most surprising thing happened on the third day. They started fighting. They had been hiding in shelters, terrified and hopeless. But watching the humans fight changed something in them. These strangers from across the galaxy had come to help when everyone else had abandoned them. The least they could do was help themselves. Commander organized the survivors. They had weapons, simple things, hunting rifles and tools that could be used as clubs. They didn't have armor or training, but they had anger and fear and the desperate need to protect what was left of their world. A group of 50 approached HFY's position on the morning of the third day. "We want to fight," said. He was on the ground now, having abandoned his dying ship. His face was bruised and his arm was in a makeshift sling, but his eyes were determined. HFY looked at them. They were scared. They were injured. Most of them were civilians who had never held a weapon before. "Can you follow orders?" she asked. "Yes," said. "Can you hold a position and not run when things get bad?" "We will not run from our own planet," replied with quiet dignity. "We've been running for too long." HFY nodded slowly. "Then grab a weapon, fall in with 3rd Squad. Private Dongwoo will show you what to do." Dongwoo looked surprised when 50 were assigned to his squad, but he adapted quickly. "Okay," he said to them. "It's simple. They are bugs, big, mean, acid-dripping bugs. You point your weapon at them. You pull the trigger. You keep pulling the trigger until they stop moving. Any questions? One raised a hand timidly. What if we miss? Dongwu grinned. Then you shoot again. There's plenty of them to practice on. The combined force of humans and held the line together. They weren't as skilled as the Marines, but they knew the city. They knew shortcuts and hiding places. They knew which buildings were stable and which ones would collapse if you looked at them wrong. More importantly, they were fighting for their homes. That gave them strength. Medic Wu worked without rest, treating both human and wounded. His medical bay, set up in an old-school building, was always full. Blood covered the floor. The supplies were running low. I need more bandages, he called out to anyone who was listening. And plasma, we're almost out of plasma. A medic appeared with supplies. Will these work, she asked. They're for biology, but... I'll make them work, Wu said, already examining the packages. He didn't care what species his patients were. Injured was injured, dying was dying. He saved them when he could. He held their hands when he couldn't. Human or it didn't matter. On the third night, they sent their elite guard. These were different from the regular warriors. They were bigger, with armor that was thicker and darker. Their mandibles were longer, their movements more coordinated. They had destroyed entire civilizations. They hit the human defensive line with overwhelming force. Captain Min led the counterattack personally with 60 Marines. He had stayed on the ship for 2 days, coordinating from orbit. But this attack was too important. He needed to be on the ground. All units, this is the captain, he said over the radio. We've got elite moving on our position. Do not engage in melee combat. Maintain distance. Use grenades and heavy weapons. The elite guards pushed forward like living tanks. Regular gunfire bounced off their armor. The Marines switched tactics immediately. Sangwoo, Min called. I need your demo team on the west flank now. Sangwoo and his team ran through the ruins carrying bags of explosives. They set up shaped charges at key positions. When the elite guards came through, Sangwoo triggered the charges. The explosions tore through the ranks, but not all of them went down. One of the elite guards broke through the line. It moved faster than anything that size should move. It headed straight for a group of civilians. HFY intercepted it. She came out of nowhere, firing her machine gun at point-blank range. The bullets hit the creature's armor and ricocheted. It turned toward her, mandibles spread wide. HFY didn't back down. She had run out of ammunition. She dropped the gun and pulled out her last grenade. The elite guard charged at her. She pulled the pin, counted to 2, and threw the grenade straight into the creature's open mouth. The explosion killed the elite guard from the inside. It also threw HFY 15 feet backward. She hit a wall hard and slid to the ground. Sergeant down, someone yelled. Wu ran to her position under fire. HFY was bleeding from her ears and nose. Her left arm was bent at a wrong angle, but she was alive. Get the civilians. To safety, she mumbled. The civilians are safe, Wu told her, already working to stabilize her. Thanks to you. Good, HFY said. Then she tried to sit up. Help me up. I need to get back to my position. You need surgery and rest. I'll rest when I'm dead, HFY growled. Help me up. Wu knew that tone. He helped her stand. By the end of the 3rd day, the Marines had lost 47 soldiers. Another 70 were wounded. They had lost twice that many, but they had held the city. They had thrown everything they had at the defenders and failed to break through. Min stood on top of a ruined building looking out over the city. Smoke rose from 100 fires. The smell of death was everywhere. Bodies human and covered the streets. Jinho's voice came through his radio. Captain, sensors are showing something. They are pulling back. Pulling back, why? Unknown, sir, but they're withdrawing from the city. They're heading back toward their hive structure. Min felt a cold suspicion. They're not retreating, they're regrouping. Where's their hive ship? Still in low orbit, sir. Wait, it's moving. It's descending toward the hive structure on the surface. Min understood immediately. The Queen was coming down to the planet. She was going to lead the final assault herself. He pressed the general frequency. All units, this is Captain Min. We've got maybe 6 hours before the next attack. Use that time to rest, resupply, and prepare. The real fight is coming. In the makeshift hospital, and human wounded lay side by side. They shared water and rations. They told each other stories about their homes, their families, their lives before the war. They had been strangers 4 days ago. Now they were brothers and sisters in arms. Outside, the sun was setting on prime. The sky was red with smoke and fire. But somewhere in that burning city, hope was still alive. The hive ship hung in low orbit like a massive, diseased moon. It was organic, grown rather than built, covered in ridges of black chitin and pulsing with a sickly green light. From this ship, the Queen directed the entire swarm. Captain Min stood in the briefing room aboard the Righteous Fury. Around him were the survivors of 3 days of hell. Only 180 Marines were still combat effective. They looked exhausted, covered in bandages and bruises, but their eyes were hard and ready. "This is the plan," Min said, pointing to a holographic projection of the hive ship. "We board the ship, we find the Queen, and we kill her. Without the Queen, the swarm loses coordination. They become just individual bugs instead of an organized army." "That's a suicide mission," someone said from the back. Min didn't deny it. "Probably. That's why I'm only asking for volunteers. Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so. No shame in it. You've all done more than enough." Nobody moved. Not a single Marine stepped back. Lieutenant Jin spoke up. "Sir, we came here to finish this. We're not stopping now." A murmur of agreement went through the room. Min felt his throat tighten. He had led these people into hell, and they were willing to follow him even deeper. "Then let's make it count," he said quietly. "We move in 2 hours." The boarding team formed up in the hangar bay. Jin led the first squad. Corporal Jin Ho had left his sensor station to join them. He was trained as a Marine before becoming a tech specialist, and he wanted to be on the ground for this one. Sergeant Sangwoo checked his explosives one last time. He had enough charges to level a small building. He'd need every one of them. Private Wu loaded her rifle with hands that didn't shake. She had seen too much in the past 3 days to be scared anymore. Fear was for people who still had something to lose. Private Dongwoo painted something on his helmet. When Wu asked him what it was, he grinned. "It's Korean. It means for those who can't fight back. I figure if I'm going to die today, I should remember why." The phrase spread. Within minutes, half the Marines were writing it on their armor in whatever language they knew. Sergeant Haewon was there too, against every medical order. Her arm was in a brace and her ribs were wrapped tight, but she had refused to stay behind. "You can barely walk," Wu had told her. "I can still shoot," she had replied. That was the end of the discussion. The assault shuttles launched from the Righteous Fury. They headed straight for the hive ship with no attempt at stealth. There was no point. They knew they were coming. The hive ship's defenses opened up. Organic cannons that fired acid and spikes of bone. The shuttles dodged and weaved through the fire. One shuttle took a direct hit and exploded. 12 Marines gone in an instant. The remaining shuttles punched through the hull of the hive ship and landed in what looked like a massive organic tunnel. The doors opened and the Marines poured out. The interior of the hive ship was a nightmare. The walls were made of some kind of living tissue that pulsed and moved. The air was thick with a smell like rotting meat and chemicals. The floor was slick with fluids that nobody wanted to identify. And they were everywhere. "Move fast," Jin shouted. "Don't let them surround us." The Marines pushed forward, fighting their way through corridor after corridor. They came at them from all sides, from the walls, from the ceiling, from tunnels that opened without warning. Wu found herself back to back with a Marine she didn't know, both of them firing in opposite directions. "This is insane," she yelled over the gunfire. "Yep," the other Marine yelled back. "Just keep shooting." Sangwoo planted explosives as they moved, marking their path. "We're going to need a way out," he explained when someone asked. "These charges will blow a hole straight through the hull when we need it." If we're still alive to need it, Jinho thought but didn't say. They pushed deeper into the ship. The resistance got stronger. These weren't just warriors, these were the Queen's personal guard, bigger and more vicious than anything they'd faced before. Min led from the front, his rifle never silent. "Keep moving, we're close." They were close, they could feel it. The air was getting thicker, the walls were pulsing faster. Somewhere ahead the Queen was waiting. Then Jinho noticed something. "Sir, look at the walls." There were nodes, small, pulsing sacs attached to the walls at regular intervals. They glowed with the same sickly green light as the rest of the ship. "What are those?" Min asked. Jinho scanned them with his portable sensor. I think these are pheromone nodes. The Queen uses them to coordinate the swarm. It's how she controls all the at once." Understanding hit Min like lightning. "Sangwoo, plant charges on every one of those nodes you see." Sangwoo didn't ask questions. He started running through the corridors, slapping explosive charges on every node he could find. Other Marines followed his lead, using their own grenades and explosives. "If we destroy the nodes, we cut off her communication with the swarm," Jinho explained. "They won't be able to coordinate." "Good," Min said. "Let's make her blind." They fought their way to what could only be the Queen's chamber. It was a massive cavern inside the ship, the walls covered in the glowing nodes. And in the center, surrounded by thousands of warriors, was the Queen. She was huge, 20 feet tall, with a body like a bloated insect and mandibles that could tear through steel. Her eyes, hundreds of them, turned toward the Marines. The Queen shrieked. It was a sound that made their bones vibrate. The warriors charged. "Light them up," Jin screamed. The Marines opened fire with everything they had. Rifles, machine guns, grenades, rocket launchers. The sound was deafening. The chamber filled with smoke and the screams of dying. But there were too many. For every warrior that fell, two more took its place. Haewon went down when a warrior slashed her leg. Dongwoo dragged her to cover while Wu provided covering fire. Wu appeared from somewhere, already working to stop the bleeding. "I'm fine," Haewon yelled, trying to push him away. "You're not fine," Wu yelled back. "Stop being stupid and let me work." Min fought his way toward the Queen. Marines fell around him. He could hear their screams, could feel the heat of explosions, but he kept moving forward. Sangwoo was right behind him, carrying his last bag of explosives. "Sir, if I can get close enough to plant these on the Queen herself." "Do it," Min ordered. They made it halfway across the chamber when the Queen moved. She was fast, impossibly fast for something so large. One massive claw swept out and caught Sangwoo, throwing him into a wall. The demolition sergeant hit hard, too hard. He slid to the ground, blood running from his mouth. But his hand was still gripping the detonator. "Captain," he called out weakly, "the charges on the nodes, they're ready." Min understood. If they detonated now, it would destroy the pheromone network. The swarm would lose coordination. But they wouldn't kill the Queen. She would survive and rebuild. Unless someone stayed behind to finish the job. "Get everyone out," Min ordered. "Now." "Sir," Jin looked at him in horror. "That's an order, Lieutenant. Get them out." Jin wanted to argue, but she was a soldier. She knew what orders meant. "All units fall back to the shuttles. Move, move, move." The Marines began fighting their way back through the corridors. Sangwoo, barely conscious, was carried by two Marines. Haewon limped along with Wu supporting her. Min stayed behind. He looked at the queen. She looked back at him with her 100 eyes. Maybe she understood, maybe she didn't, it didn't matter. Min activated his radio one last time. Jin-Ho, when you get clear of the ship, detonate all charges. Don't wait for me. Sir, Jin-Ho's voice was thick with emotion. Do it, that's my last order. Min closed the channel. He looked down at his rifle. He had 5 magazines left. The queen had thousands of warriors. He smiled. Come on then, let's see what you've got. The queen shrieked and her warriors charged. Min opened fire. On the shuttle racing away from the hive ship, the Marines watched in silence as they cleared the danger zone. Captain's clear of the ship, Jin-Ho said, his voice breaking. I mean, he's far enough that the detonation won't. Do it, Jin said quietly. Honor his sacrifice. Jin-Ho pressed the detonator. The explosions started at the pheromone nodes throughout the ship. They cascaded, one after another, tearing through the living structure of the vessel. The Queen's chamber erupted in a fireball that could be seen from the planet's surface. The hive ship broke apart, pieces of it falling toward the planet like burning rain. On the surface, the remaining suddenly became confused. They stopped moving in coordinated patterns. They started fighting each other. Without the Queen's guidance, they were just individual insects, lost and directionless. The forces, supported by the remaining Marines, drove them back easily. The battle for Prime was over. In the debris field, a single escape pod drifted through space. It had been blown clear of the explosion at the last second. Inside, barely conscious and badly wounded, Captain Min breathed slowly. He had planted charges on the Queen before the detonation. He had waited just long enough to make sure she would die. Then he had run for the nearest escape pod and launched it blindly. He didn't know if he would be found. He didn't know if he would survive. But the mission was complete. That was enough. A rescue ship found his pod 2 hours later. When they opened it and saw the human captain still alive, they wept with joy and relief. Against all odds, against every calculation, humanity had won. 3 months later, Prime looked different. The cities were still, buildings still bore the marks of battle, but life had returned, walked the streets again. Children played in parks that had been battlefields. Slowly, carefully, the planet was healing. In the center of the capital city, they built a memorial. It was simple but powerful, a black stone wall with names carved into it. 147 names. All the human Marines who hadn't come home. The dedication ceremony was attended by thousands, came from all across the planet. Representatives from a dozen alien species came too, species that had refused to help when the distress call went out. They came now to witness and to remember. Sergeant Haywon stood at attention in front of the memorial. Her left arm was still in a brace, probably would be for another month. Her face had new scars that would never fully fade, but she stood straight and proud in her dress uniform. She had been promoted, they all had. The surviving Marines were heroes now. The galaxy couldn't stop talking about them. But standing here looking at those names, Haywon didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a survivor, and sometimes that was harder. Sergeant Haywon, an elder, approached her. His name was, he had been a ship commander. Now he was something more, a leader of his people forged in fire. Would you say a few words? Haywon looked at the crowd, thousands of faces looking back at her, human and others. She had never been good with speeches. But she owed it to the names on that wall. These Marines, she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd, came from Earth. Most of them had never met her before. They had no reason to care about your planet, but they came anyway. They came because someone called for help, and Marines don't ignore calls for help. She paused, looking at the wall of names. Private Wu used to joke that we were too stubborn to die. Corporal Sangwoo would say we were too dumb to quit. But the truth is simpler. We came because it was the right thing to do. These 147 Marines gave their lives so that 2 million could live. That's not heroism. That's just what we do. The crowd was silent. Many were crying. They're not coming home, Haywan continued. This is their home now, Prime. They bought it with their blood, so I ask you to remember them. Remember what they did. Remember why they did it. And maybe, when you hear someone else calling for help someday, you'll do the same. She stepped back and saluted the wall. Behind her, the other surviving Marines did the same. The elder spoke next. We will never forget. Every year on this day, we will gather here. Our children and our children's children will know the story. They will know that when the galaxy abandoned us, humanity walked through the smoke to save us. Captain Min watched from a wheelchair at the back of the crowd. He was recovering, but slowly. The doctors said he would walk again eventually. He wasn't in a hurry. He had nowhere urgent to be. Commander found him after the ceremony. Captain, how are you feeling? Better, Min said honestly. The medical technology is impressive. Your doctor saved my life. You saved our entire species. It seems like a fair trade. Sat down beside him. I wanted to ask you something. The Earth government has offered you a promotion. Admiral Min, you would command an entire fleet. I heard, Min said. But you declined. I did. Why? Min was quiet for a moment. Because I'm a Marine, not an admiral. My place is with my people, the ones who were there in the smoke with me. Nodded slowly. I understand. He stood to leave, then paused. There is something you should know. The galaxy is talking about what happened here. Other species are asking questions. Questions about humanity, about what makes you different. And what do you tell them? Min asked. Smiled. I tell them the truth, that humans are stubborn, violent, and completely insane, and that when the darkness comes, there is no one else I would rather have at my side. The political aftermath was complicated. The Assembly, which had refused to help, sent an official apology and a request for a military alliance with humanity. The Empire, which had also refused, now offered trade agreements and technology exchanges. Earth's government was polite but cold. You didn't get to be humanity's friend by abandoning people to die. But there were positive developments too. The Confederation shared their medical technology freely with Earth, their shield generators, their faster-than-light communications. Everything they had, they offered. We owe you more than we can ever repay, told the Earth ambassador. This is just a start. Other species were watching. Species that Earth had never even made contact with before were reaching out. They wanted to meet these humans. They wanted to understand them. And some of them needed help. Lieutenant Jin worked with Private Dongwu now, training military forces. They were building a real army, one that could defend itself. They were good students. They had learned the hard way what happened when you relied on others for protection. Remember, Dongwu told a class of recruits, the weapon is just a tool. What matters is why you fight. Fight for your people. Fight for those who can't fight for themselves. That's what makes you strong. The recruits listened carefully. They had seen what human Marines could do. They wanted to be like that. Combat engineer Mi Young had stayed on Prime. She worked with engineers now, developing hybrid technologies that combined human and designs. The results were impressive. You humans think differently than we do, an engineer told her one day. When we see a problem, we analyze it carefully. We run simulations, we plan. And when humans see a problem, Mi Young asked with a smile. You hit it with a hammer until it stops being a problem, they said. It's crude, it's simple, and somehow it works. Mi Young laughed. Welcome to human engineering. Medic Wu worked in a hospital that treated both humans and now. He had learned medicine. The doctors had learned human medicine. Together, they saved lives that neither species could have saved alone. We're not so different, he told a nurse one day. Human, or everyone bleeds the same. Everyone wants to go home to their families. Everyone fears death and hopes for tomorrow. The nurse who had lost her family in the war nodded quietly. That's why what your Marines did matters so much. They saw past our differences. They saw people who needed help. 6 months after the battle, a new distress call came in. This one was from the Collective, a species on the far edge of known space. They were under attack by pirates, not though, but still dangerous, still deadly. The message reached the Righteous Fury, which was still docked at Prime undergoing repairs. Captain Min, now recovered and walking again, read the message in his quarters. His senior staff gathered around him. "It's not our fight," Jinho said carefully. "They aren't our allies, we don't owe them anything." "But they're calling for help," Haewon said quietly. "They are," Min agreed. The room was silent for a moment. "What do we do, sir?" Jin asked. Min looked at his people, his Marines, the ones who had walked through hell with him and come out the other side. He knew what the smart choice was: rest, recover, let someone else handle it. But he also knew what the right choice was. "We answer the call," he said simply. "We're Marines, it's what we do." Nobody argued, nobody questioned, they just nodded and went to prepare. Word spread quickly. The Righteous Fury was deploying again. This time they weren't alone. 5 warships requested permission to join them, then 3 vessels, then a science ship that had retrofitted itself with weapons. The galaxy was learning. When humans answered a call for help, others followed. The Righteous Fury left dock 3 days later. Captain Min stood on the bridge as they prepared to jump to FTL. Behind them, an entire fleet had assembled, ships from a dozen species, all following the human example. "Sir," Jinho said from his station, "they are asking for our estimated arrival time." "Tell them we're on our way," Min replied, "and tell them to hold on, help is coming." The ship jumped to FTL, disappearing in a flash of light. On Prime, at the memorial wall, a group of children stood with their teacher. "Who were the humans?" one child asked. The teacher smiled. They were strangers who became friends, warriors who became heroes. They were people who heard a cry for help and walked through the smoke to answer it, and because of them we're still here. "Will they come back?" another child asked. The teacher looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear as the sun set. "Maybe, maybe not, but somewhere out there someone else is calling for help, and the humans are answering. That's what they do. That's what makes them special." In space, the fleet raced toward another battle, another desperate call for aid. The humans didn't know if they would win. They didn't know if they would survive. But they knew why they were going. Because someone needed help. And when the cry came, humanity walked through the smoke. They always would. In the years that followed, the story spread across the galaxy. It became legend, then myth, then something more. Parents told it to their children. Soldiers repeated it to their recruits. Historians recorded it in their archives. The story of the day aliens cried for aid, and human Marines walked through the smoke. The story of the day humanity showed the galaxy what it meant to be truly brave. The story of the day everything changed. And whenever a new distress call went out, whenever someone was in trouble and afraid and alone, they would look to the stars and whisper a hope. Maybe the humans will come. And more often than not, they did.